until, I think Bill did say 1:45 a.m., but that's just when the pizza was finished, actually. Some of us were here until about 2:30. You left a little earlier.
Yeah.
That was a smart choice.
I have no idea what you guys did after I left.
I don't know either. I don't have much of a memory at that point, but riding on fumes, hopefully I might stop and get more coffee afterwards, but we'll do our best, which is always what we do here at these Titanic Glory little convention meetups. But when I first got the agenda for the conference from Bill, and notice we were the very first presentation on the very first day at almost not even 9 a.m. I knew we had to try to do something unique and special. And then our most loquacious team member couldn't make the journey down here. But he had the sound excuse of needing to go visit his girlfriend in Canada, which kind of sounds like the punchline of a bad joke, like that. I knew again we had to tailor this differently. But again, this is the unforeseen aspect. It's like kind of a motif of Titanic Honor and Glory, adjusting something to the last minute because it doesn't go as planned. But collectively, we usually pull off something that's marvelous, usually. Most of the personalities in this room specialize in some field of Titanic research. We have people here who have researched in passengers and crew, all in their biography. Some specialize in the way Titanic navigated. Others have been to the shipwreck before. And of course, a handful here, many people here have descended from the few who have wandered her decks more than 100 years ago. For a child who soaked up everything about Titanic, I have looked up to a lot of you. And you could have been in some of those documentaries I vaguely remembered from the 90s, or in those books that got me started obsessing over this ship 20 years ago. And I'm not trying to call you old or anything, but you've written terrific books and given wonderful lectures. And what we do is seemingly not as significant in our eyes. We are just trying to create a video game. And I'm not going to talk too much about ourselves and where we came from and something like that, but I'd like you all to know how humbling it is for us to be in front of you all today. And so I thank you for your time, as I'm still trying to stall. While our project moves forward, and hopefully continues to move forward, it seems that while you might study passengers and crew and the history, all which we love, we do our part researching Titanic to bring her back into consciousness, the ship herself. The tale of the ship wouldn't be whole without its main character. Titanic became this living, breathing being thanks to her infamous notoriety. We have a particular expectation that needs to be met when we imagine Titanic. It is unquestionably a difficult undertaking to build the ship. At the same task, it was huge to build her in 1912. It is today in a digital world. It took approximately 3,000 men, nearly 3 years to build her. And it feels like it's taking 3,000 years, 6 men to build her on a computer. This is a great undertaking. I see this project almost like a book. While it is a video game, we are almost like a novel, a colossal encyclopedia of Titanic information. However, it's interactive and visual. We're not exactly finished with the book, and if you've ever published a book before, you know how difficult it can be. It's an uphill battle. But with this book, we can release to you all a chapter at a time and say, well, why don't you read this chapter while we'll start working on it? And today, we're going to release some of the best chapters to you right now. So Kyle and I are going to read to you a few chapters of this video game book, hopefully in a few minutes when it loads, because this is what usually happens.
Looks like it's hung up on 84%.
What's that?
Looks like it's hung up on 84%.
It likes to do this.
Do you have to have internet to load it?
No, it gets to a point and then it goes.
Yeah, it could take 10 minutes, it could take half an hour, really.
It didn't take a half an hour last night, but
So the last night it did hold on 84% for a while.
it did hold for a while. But maybe I'll just jump to the end and talk about what we do on our spare time. for Titanic Honor Glory as we're working ahead, which is okay. Like I said, we winged a few things, but it'll be worth it in the end, trust me. I will jump to the end because, like I said, here at Titanic Honor and Glory, one of the things that seems to happen is, well, we can't do it this way, let's switch it up a bit. Before we explore the ship in the digital world and explain to you exactly what's happening, exactly who went where and what, which I'm sure you all know, as we work on this project and we try to create her life again in the digital world, we've encountered more and more ways to bring her back. And it's because of our excitement of the ship, we find different ways to get her here. And we've discovered more people who are obsessed with this ship. And one of them is our friend Zeno back here, who asked us about 3D printing of different parts of Titanic, including the Titanic herself. And I'm sure as you walked in here, you saw the gigantic model of Titanic back there, but he's also been 3D printing for us small little Titanic models, which are super detailed. And he started to do that because, like us, like myself, wanting to build a Titanic in the digital world, he just wants to recreate Titanic. You know, I want to recreate Titanic. And so we've started the 3D prints, which is basically taking the digital models that we create, which you'll see hopefully when it's not 84%. Taking the digital models, digital as in something that's created in a computer, taking the digital models and actually having something recreated out of plastic into something physical. And so using those files, we've recreated actual items based off of them into something physical. Like here, the candelabra from the D-deck grand staircase, an engine telegraph, and a davit, a lifeboat davit from the ship. All of which are technically able to be functional, made out of plastic.
Hold up the davit for us in the back.
Sure. And this will be on our table for you all to look at. And now the main reason why we do these things is, yes, we have the idea of selling those to help with the game's funding.
It did something.
Watch that, it does move, it does crank. But it's because, hey, this is something neat that we would like to have on our desk.
All right.
See, it did something finally.
Yes,
Thank you, Kyle.
and then when we want to explore the second class cases, we're gonna have to wait
I don't think, as much as I love second class and third class and crew,
We'll stick to the
we'll
nice
stick to
areas.
that. So finally, I guess I'll finish my little speech here. Kyle and I are going to explore this, this crazy novel of Titanic. Is it ready?
Almost.
All right. I want to thank everybody who's helped out with Titanic Honor and Glory, from our wonderful historical advisors, mainly Park Stevenson, Dana Clifthorner, Bill Sauter, and Ken Marshall, the guys who have helped to figure out the looks and appearance of the ship. All of the workers who aren't here today, including Tom Linsky, who's in Canada. I'll talk about the other ones who help out as we go along, which include people from around the world who are passionate about Titanic. That's Nicholas in France, Giovanni in Mexico, Christopher in Australia, James in New York City, Kyle, who's right here, Zeno, who's in the back. I want to thank all of them who have made this project, so who it is, what it is. I'm very proud of it, and humbled to have your attention for a little while as we go around it. And hopefully, if you have any hesitations about a video game of the Titanic, we can persuade you that it's not exactly what you thought it was. So let's venture into Titanic, talk about what you're seeing, and also talk about what Titanic Honor and Glory has become. Because for us, it's more than just a video game now. It was just a video game project in the beginning. And it wasn't made because, hey, it'd be a cool, awesome idea to have a Titanic video game. It was made, again, because for the same reason why we made these products. It's something that us as Titanic fans, Titanic amateur historians would want to have. We wanted to explore the ship. We wanted to go around, be able to see different areas and look at it. But what has become of it is something beyond us. Now it's a project where we can go to realistic areas, and now it's so much more. But what I'll explain for you now is what a video game about the Titanic really is. A role-playing video game is where you become a character, not a historical character. I think we've talked about that all the time. If you don't become one of the 2,208 passengers and crew on the Titanic, they all stay the same. You become somebody of yourself. You're your unique character, because we don't want to take away from somebody who's actually on board the ship. But being a fictional person on board the Titanic, you get to learn about the lives of those who were on board the ship. That's our way, that's our vehicle to transport you back and learn about those passengers and those crew members on board Titanic. Now, I can't see exactly where we are, Kyle, so just take us around and have some fun right now as we go through this. Video games lately, and for the longest time, get a bad reputation, obviously. Many of them are just for basic, boring, fun, amusement, sometimes violence, we get that. But what they can be is for fun, enjoyment, and if you're having fun, if you're enjoying something like a book, like a subject in school, you'll learn more about it. And that's why we think that if you're enjoying, if a child is playing a video game about the Titanic, just like if any of us who already enjoy Titanic are watching a documentary, we're going to learn more about it. So if you are more invested in a video game, you will learn. It's our way of tricking anybody to learn about the Titanic. Basically, we're hoping that the next generation, even below us, my younger cousins who are 5 and 4, who are somewhat interested in what I do when I talk about ships, will play this video game someday, look around, explore it, and want to learn more about the ship in this way. Instead of the books that I use, the documentaries that everybody was in, this will be their way to see it and learn more about the ship. And the biggest way now is with virtual reality, which some of you have put on before here when we were here last year, some did last night, and hopefully others will do this weekend. Virtual reality is obviously a way where you can really step back in time and walk the decks of Titanic. You put on a headset and you're transported back onto the ship. That's it's in itself a unique function. Virtual reality can really allow you to almost get the total immersion of the ship and experience. Nope, that's not it. Is it my opinion? Okay. All right, sorry. Virtual reality is almost to the effect where you can get, the only thing missing is the feel and the smell of the water as you're walking by, and they're almost getting to that point where you can get virtual reality. You can almost, there's a way that you can even feel, you can put gloves on your hand and you can feel the ship as you're walking about. Now, all of this, of course, is pointless if we don't involve the stories of the passengers and crew who were on board that ship. And as I said in the beginning, you will play this video game as a fictional character, and you'll go around and you will meet the 2,208 people on board the ship. And now, the main point of going around and meeting these 2,002 people is to complete a story. But this story is so that you will go around, is our vehicle again to introduce you to these characters, these real life people, learn their life story. Oh, yes. Learn their life story, get invested in them, and when the ship eventually does sink, because this is Titanic, and that's mainly the reason why we're all here today, you will have a more emotional effect when you learn their outcome. For example, can you actually take us on a place, and I'll talk about it for a minute. Take us to the grand staircase. Oh, it doesn't matter. Just take us to the grand staircase. Not too fast, please, Kyle. Yeah. Let's not get seasick. We don't want to fall down the grand staircase like some passengers. That's a good segue. Take us to the top level of the grand staircase, just for fun. So imagine walking over go back to the reception room. Imagine walking into the reception room for a while, and going down to dinner and seeing everyone in their period dress, and talking about the politics and the atmosphere of the day in the polite fashion that they would in 1912. This is also a reason why we wish to create this game, because you'll learn about the world in 1912, which was, in a way, vastly different than the world of 2020. People were completely different back then. There was, in all the three different classes, religion was more important in everybody's daily life. We can also explore the world of upstairs, downstairs, because we will be playing as both a passenger and a crew member. Our way of being able to explore the ship, you will start off as, I think this is a spoiler, I guess, you'll start off as a crew member working your way up through the classes until you can get into first class. Virtual reality also allows you to explore the ship and play the piano, for instance. I want to talk a little bit about the research also that goes into this project, because we're not just creating the ship willy-nilly. We do put a lot of time and effort into getting things right, because what is the point in doing it all if it's just going to be created out of thin air? For instance, we make sure we have a tapestry or a texture accurately done. If you want to, there's this right there. This candelabra, this 21 light candelabra was measured from photographs taken from the Olympics. And basically, if you can figure out one measurement anywhere on the ship in the photograph, you can get the measurement from anything else.
Yes, and the candelabra you see here in the game, we used, this is a very low detail model, which means it doesn't have a lot of triangles or polygons making it up. And it has a set of textures that we baked. We talked about this at the beginning.
Maybe you should explain quickly then what it takes to create a video game. If you're going to bring this up again.
I'll just say that if you want to make a nice model like this, a model is made of math. Yes, that's it. Yes.
I didn't want to go into that too much.
Yeah, and you have two models, high poly, low poly. The high poly one, all you need to know is it has lots of details that you don't really need when you're wandering around the game like this. The low poly model has a lot less detail, and you bake a set of textures, images from the high poly model, and and you apply it to the low one, and then it makes it look nice. It makes it look detailed. But what we did was we took the high polygon model and we made it printable, and then we made that. We just plugged the data to the printer, and the printer did the work. And now we have a real life candelabra. I'll get it a little smaller.
A tiny bit smaller. Since you did mention like what it is, you mentioned texturing and baking. Let's try to explain exactly how to create a video game before we go any further. Can you turn it into wireframe or something quickly, Kyle?
Yes. Let's have a little fun here.
Because
oh boy.
this is
I'm gonna have to bring this stuff back.
a video game version of the Titanic is almost like a film set in a way, or a regular room, or a physical scale model. It's built the same way, but just with what Kyle said, triangles, which are lines connected together, and it's all ones and zeros, more or less. But you have to know when to stop adding detail, otherwise it's not going to load and your computer's going to crash. And if we want to be able to get this into the hands of many people, we have to put just the right amount of detail in it to be able to share it. And of course, a ship like the Titanic, with as much detail as she had and with as many stories as she had, there's an unlimited amount of literally stories we could put in and detail that we could put in. I know whenever we go to a different convention, Tom and I went to Canada, and we kept hearing stories about different passengers. I remember hearing finally the story of Hilda Slater, and I thought, I want to put in just her story of her losing her trousseau. I was like, well, can we put her into the game too? And I think, well, yeah, we can. We don't have enough second class passengers ever. And that's just another added person to the game. It's like, well, there's no problem with that. And then I remember we also learned about George Wright and his gigantic catalog of businesses. And like, okay, we can create George Wright's gigantic thick catalog of businesses that he might have had on board, and that's a prop that we have to create. But in theory, because we're not limited to anything physical, we can create whatever we want to a point. That's the beauty of this. Like I said, I believe calling this video game project almost like a novel or a book. Even if we finish this in a certain way and release this book, we can keep adding chapters to our book afterwards. Many of our historical advisors had the desire of this being one of the largest repositories of Titanic information, almost like a digital and visual Titanic encyclopedia. No offense to TitanicEncyclopedia.com. But once we finish our project, if we wanted to add to it, add a certain passenger story, say for example, if we only had the most famous passengers once it was finished, if we wanted to continue adding the lesser known passengers, we would be able to then continuously add their stories to the game. So people could continue to learn down the line about more passengers until ultimately all 2,200 passengers, and then even passengers on the Carpathia could be learned about. And you don't learn about them simply by walking up to a passenger on the ship and just reading a text file. If you've ever played a video game, there's this thing, they're basically called quests. Again, a quest is kind of like reading a novel. I'm going to use this metaphor a lot, I'm sorry. It's a quest, it's a choose your own adventure kind of a way to, again, be tricked into learning in our way of doing the video game. Instead of just being taught the person's motivations, instead of being taught that Colonel Archibald Gracie enjoyed the Civil War, was a historian of the Civil War, perhaps you go up to him and he will tell you a story of the Civil War and then ask you questions, and then he'll give you a little mission to go throughout the ship and talk to Mr. Strauss, who was doing something else in Congress when he was a congressman, and then you have to go back and report to him. You have to do these little missions, and these missions will inform you about the Titanic's passengers, and you'll learn about them as you go along. But you don't know that you're learning because you're just playing a video game. We'll know that we're learning because we're Titanic enthusiasts if we're playing this, but the average video gamer will not technically know that they're learning. And that's our little, like, hey, this is more than just a video game. We don't want to ruin people's fun by telling them that they're learning, but it's when people say that they just think that they want to play this video game to explore the Titanic and they just want to get to the end where the sinking happens, there's much more there. There's much more that can happen. And I believe we're really proud of what we have in between those two bookends. Now, do you wish to explain, don't get too technical, see where you're at right here. Do you wish to explain what you did to bring to life some of the detail here without getting too technical for everybody? Because I can't explain it, because Kyle, in our video game, in our production pipeline, some of us do there's modelers. The modelers, obviously, like an actual scale model back there, we create objects, and then some people, mainly Kyle, bring them to life, as I say, and Kyle works his magic. Can you kind of explain how you make your magic happen, Mr. Wizard?
Well, basically, I do magic.
Thank you.
Whatever works.
Whatever works. Now, Kyle, why do you wish to create magic? Why do you wish to recreate the Titanic so much? Is it just because you want to see her brought back to life, or do you have a...
It's largely that, I think, was wanting to see the ship brought back to life. Why Titanic? I don't know, I can't explain that, just like it's difficult for me to explain this. But, you know, we all have this fascination with the Titanic, and we all want to walk the decks and see what the ship was like, and to be transported back to, you know, this weird thing that, you know, to everyone else before it sank, it was just another ship. And it's, nobody gave any thought to what light fixtures were up in this cabinet, or what was up here, or what was on these carvings, or anything like that. But for some reason we want to know, and other people want to know, and we want to show you what this is like, and we want to look into it as deeply as possible and recreate it as closely as possible in a medium that everyone can experience. And this is what we do, and we do it because it's fun. We do it because it's interesting. We do it because it's really cool. Look at this. And yeah.
I will give it a quick modern day example of how bringing back to life in a video game medium is interesting. After Notre Dame burnt down, the video game Assassin's Creed, which takes place, it's a series of video games. They had scanned and they 3D scanned Notre Dame Cathedral a few months prior to the fire for the video game Assassin's Creed. And they had digital files of the entire cathedral, and they were able to share it with the conservatory that was going to recreate Notre Dame. So when you are able to recreate something in the digital world, basically we have it saved forever in a sense. What we're doing here, lately now there's this big to-do that Titanic is going to finally collapse. It's just been back to the wreck, and you know there's this destruction, you know, whatever, what have you. You can believe that, you cannot. You can say it's going to be there for another 100 years, but still, it doesn't look like the way it did in 1912 when all the drama, everything that we study had happened. And this is essentially when it was the most famous, and arguably the most interesting to many of us in this room. And the most beautiful. It was a beautiful ship, and we want to see. Can you go to the lounge?
Oh yes.
Let's go to the first class lounge. And not all of us here can venture to Anik, to the White Swan Hotel, to see the RMS Olympic dining room, for instance, and have wonderful moments of just feeling like they're inside Titanic and hug a column like I did when I was there.
Sometimes you just have to hug the column.
Yeah. Now again, I want to stress while we're trying to have a little bit of levity here while we're explaining what we do, we do understand that this is a video game about Titanic, and a lot of people still have hesitation regarding that. And if I've had to have this conversation with many people who have said to me, well, how can you possibly create a video game about Titanic? It was a disaster. It was about a shipwreck, and almost 1,500 people died. And I give them the argument, well, there were several movies made about the Titanic, and 1,500 people died in those movies. It's essentially the same thing, but you're not experiencing it the same way. I get it, but again, in my video game, in our video game project, you see a lot more beforehand. In the movies, it's the same thing. You connect with the characters, and you get to feel with them, and then you experience the loss and the tragedy, and you will even more so in the video game, because you'll have hours and hours and hours to learn about these characters. And yes, it might all feel more tangible to you, but you'll learn a lot more. So I always compare a video game. If anyone online argues with me, well, I just think a video game is inappropriate about the Titanic. And I said, well, I hope you've never seen James Cameron's film where you're upset about that one, because it's essentially the same thing. It's
Some
just
of
as
them are.
violence. And I'll even say that I'm making sure that our game is a little bit more accurate and respectful. But if anyone here also has that issue, I hope to have an intelligent conversation about it, because when I do have the chance to really talk about it with somebody in depth and not in front of all these people at 9 o'clock in the morning with just one cup of coffee, I can usually convince them that we're doing something where we're trying to bring everybody back to life respectfully, not bring them back to life, but bring the ship back to life respectfully, because this is something that we have moments where we'll go around and I'll be making a basic cabin on B deck or A deck, one of the most quote unquote boring first class cabins, basic white walls, and then I'll go look for a testimony or something. I'll go see whose cabin that was, and I'll recognize the name, and it just kind of gets to you like this was so-and-so's cabin. This is
Real people live
Francis
there.
Malay's cabin. I know the story of what happened to him, or I'll go on E-Deck, and I know what happened in this location. And you're recreating a place. You're recreating some location where someone had their last moments, essentially. And that happens a lot in the back of the ship too, in the third class cases.
And here we're about to see Thomas Andrews' cabin.
Oh, it's true, yes. Recreate spaces
I
that.
have a question back here.
Oh, yes.
Oh,
Oh, yes, sorry.
no, not a question, but the three of us right here have been in that diagram with the white swan.
Oh, this isn't
17.
something?
That was scary looking.
Oh, sorry. I didn't mean, I hope.
You did a great job.
Oh, thank you.
It's exactly like I remember it.
I don't know if, our research is, a big part of this. We use archival photos many times, as much as we possibly can. Obviously, plans, of RMS Olympic and Titanic when available, as many detailed plans, technical plans to get all the nitty-gritties down. But we also use testimony from first class passengers, second class, etc. Luckily, some passengers were very observant when they were walking around and wrote things down in letters and in their diaries, and we were able to use those as well too. And that's how we're going to be able to recreate the sinking. One thing that, can you go back to Thomas? Oh no, what are the other cabinet on the other side? Speaking of photographs, one of the best photographs we have come from the person who stayed in this cabin, of course, Mr. Brown.
And this is his camera.
This is
he
his
used.
camera.
This is based on a real camera that
The
was
camera that
very
he used.
similar to the one he had. The Kodak Best Pocket.
Yes.
And one of his photos was taken about right here, kind of looking at that table.
Right there looking at that dresser. And even Father Brown, he wasn't Father Brown yet when he was on board Titanic, but since the ship left on April 10th from Southampton, we plan to show the entire voyage in its entirety. This is all, of course, if we're able to finish it the way that we hope to finish it. We were able to show April 10th through the 15th, and even a few days afterwards. But you'll experience the entire voyage of Titanic, which would include Father Brown until his departure in Queenstown. I don't think we're going to go into second class and crew spaces just because it might take a while to load, but so we're going to see mainly first class areas. We'll probably show you second class and crew spaces at our roundtable discussion zone later.
Yes,
But-
you'll get to play this demo yourself also.
But we're not just focusing on the first class, which is what happens usually in Titanic films, seemingly. We want to make sure that we show all walks of life in all aspects, again, of 1912. So I mentioned before, when Tom and I went to Halifax, how I wanted to include Hilda Slater. But we are going to include a lot of second class and third class, and that also includes some of the lesser known minorities on board. So did you say?
We're going to the post office.
Oh, okay, if you can go to the crew quarters, that's fine. Yes, and that also includes a lot of the crew areas as well. Well, I think it's a long way, I guess, Kyle, to the post office.
There are a couple of places, for example, here's.
Run so people can see what they're going.
Now, if you would like to see where the servants and the passengers ate and the postal workers, this is where.
Slow down. I'm getting seasick. And what's interesting is, you look at deck plans of Titanic, you even look at photographs, and you don't get a sense of where you really are, and you don't understand the ship until you see it in a 3D space. And sometimes you can read a testimony and be confused by it, and then once you reevaluate what the passenger says, and you're standing in the location where they were standing when they were reporting their testimony, you're like, oh, wait a minute, this is what they meant when they said this bulkhead was like this. That makes perfect sense now. I think we've had that moment a few times.
The account of Margaret Brown.
With which part? I'm sorry.
The screw in the deck.
Oh, yes.
The auger. Let's go down there.
Okay, but the screw in the deck, yes, that makes perfect sense. Mark Brown, the screw in the deck. That
You and
makes
I
sense.
were talking about some of that last night, actually understanding the ship as an operational
Yeah,
vessel.
talk about that one.
No, Margaret Brown, the screw in the deck. When she talked about that, they were turning the watertight door. I don't think she actually mentioned it was a watertight door. She didn't know what it was, but they were closing the watertight doors outside of her cabin for F deck below, because she seemingly was actually on E deck, I believe, and outside of her cabin corridor was a watertight door control cabinet, and there was in the deck below. Thank you. That's her cabin, supposedly. There were two controls and one control to screw the watertight doors below on F deck. So there would have been a watertight door deck plate sign below, and she would have looked out, heard the commotion right after the iceberg hit, and saw crew members using a T-crank to close the door below. And really, you don't understand. I mean, her testimony can be a little confusing if you don't know what you're looking for, but if you build the ship and you know that you have to put watertight door plates above because you understand the workings of Titanic, and you just stick them there randomly above because you know you have to, and then you go back and reread her testimony and just look around and be like, wait a minute, I already put that there, this makes sense, I'll just shift it over to where she said she saw it, and everything is now aligned.
Yeah, I mean, people didn't know where she was for years, and then, when you look back at the testimony,
It makes sense.
and you look at the deck plans, and you recreate the ship like this, and you factor in other things, like where other passengers were, process of elimination and all that, you can really only come to the conclusion that she had to be in this cabin, looking out this door, seeing them putting an auger in that hole.
I think she said something also about curtains rattling or something. I think that might also mean that there was a curtain across the door. But that's a detail that I'll add later about how there were curtains to also block passengers' door for privacy on the inside, which I see in a lot of other ships on Commonwealth. There are very few, I can go into detail about this, there's very few photographs of Titanic, as many of you possibly know. And relatively, there's very few detailed photos of her sister ship, Olympic, of all the spaces on board. Olympic was a large ship, and she was documented well over her lifespan, but she changed quite a bit. But luckily, Harlan and Wolff had a professional photographer, Robert Welch, who went about and photographed many of the ships that were constructed for the White Star Line somewhat extensively, and we used those photographs as a reference for many of the aspects of Titanic. So when we go through testimony, when we go through RMS Olympic's auction catalog when she was auctioned off in the 30s, and they had a detailed account of all the little details of what were sold off of her, we go through the photographs and connect them with the auction lots to figure out what things were, and then we have to go into what were possibly still were existent on Titanic in 1912, connect all of the three pieces together, almost like a detective spider web of clues to figure out what was on Titanic and not, which is where we came up with the idea of creating a mystery on board Titanic for the plot, because what we are recreating is a mystery half the time. This is what's also taken so long to figure out what Titanic looked like. There's still areas which we have almost no records about. You think that, oh, it's Titanic, it's the most famous ship in the world, you should know everything about it. And if you've studied any aspect about Titanic, even your relatives, you know, oh my gosh, there's no information out there about some things. And the same can be said about the physical aspects of this ship. Yes, it's the most famous ship in the world, but even if you study parts of Olympic, you're not studying, you're not going to get it right with Titanic. It's completely different, and I find that all the time. I get shocked when I realize that there's huge differences in design between the three sister ships.
Yeah.
Even small little details, they were improving as, you know, between days on these ships. They learned a lot from Olympic, and they immediately made the changes to Titanic. And that becomes a headache for me when I'm trying to recreate this.
That's common practice. If you ever do this with another ship,
Right.
you're gonna run into the same problem.
But it was but like Kyle said in the beginning, and then when I asked him why he enjoys recreating Titanic, or why he wanted to, he mentioned that for her, well, back in 1912, Titanic was just, before she sank, Titanic was just another ship. And it's true. Today, when they make a cruise ship for any of these cruise lines, it's just the same ship that they built before, but just bigger. And in a sense, that's what Titanic was. Many of Titanic's interiors and her design features were featured on other ships, like Adriatic, Oceanic. The first class lounge is just a larger version of what was on board, I think, Oceanic. You find similar features and similar cabins on board Adriatic and Seadrift. But you just need to know to look at it and then just kind of make it bigger. You'd find almost the exact same dome that was on board the Grand Staircase on Laurentic, I think it is. So you see that White Star Line. We're just saying, well, this is the design that we like. Let's just put it on this new ship. Let's add a new sweeping staircase, make it bigger, and that's what happens on different cruise lines today when they make a gigantic new Oasis class liner. And like, well, I guess we put a restaurant here and use the same design as we did before. But okay, now we're into some fun spaces. I believe this is the lower one, right? Yes, there's
The mailer.
the mailroom. Okay, I get confused with the mailroom and the post office. Which one's which? This is some area where we had to use another ship as inspiration. That ship being the RMS Queen Mary, I think, to figure out the size of the hull. Again, when there's nothing really to go with, we have to go with other vessels, and even though Queen Mary is about 20 years too late, she still has a lot of the same design techniques. I want to quickly give a shout out again to Bill Sauter, who couldn't make it here today, but since he gave a lot of, he always gives a lot of technical advice for the aspects of Titanic. And these areas right here, these crew working areas, such as the post office and the mailroom, and if Kyle goes into he went in through a door. If he goes into the cargo hold here, that's also a bill zone, as I call it. Jumping back to passengers and crew for a little bit. I don't think we can go in there. But there is, on the other side of this cargo room, there's third class, some of the most, the cheapest third class spaces. These rooms were third class rooms which could be converted into cargo hold space. This is way down in the bowels of the ship on G deck. Some of the third class passengers here, these are designated for third class men. You know, all you get down here is a blanket and a pillow and not much else. I'm not even sure if you get a pillow. I think you're supposed to just basically be like, well, you brought a kit of your clothes Sleep on this, I think you guys will, but, some of the passengers in third class that we want to include, I mentioned briefly, for example, are, the minorities who are not featured ever, such as the Chinese passengers, who I think there's a documentary coming out about, sometime soon, which was very interesting.
It's called Six.
The Six, right, yes. That seems like a fascinating thing, and we talked to the producers about that, like, to incorporate them also into our game as well, so once that happens, we can, team up to get their story involved, correctly. We talked to them we gave them, an idea of like what their escape route would have been on Titanic, given that their quarters were in the bow of the ship, how they might have escaped into a lifeboat at the end. And speaking of the sinking briefly, because again, we all wouldn't be here if this ship unfortunately didn't have its demise in 1912. Obviously, this is the hardest part of the video game or any way to ever show, and I would say there's three reasons why. It's technically difficult, it's historically difficult, and it's emotionally difficult. Starting with the technical aspect, again, for a computer to create all this, it's a challenge. It's a challenge for us, and that's it's basically what's taking us so long to do. This is, again, a passion project, and it takes a lot of man hours, a lot of it in our spare time, as we have our own lives to try to do. We fail at having our own lives sometimes because this takes up so much time and effort, but we enjoy doing it. But it will eventually take hired work, man hours to create something that's able to be sent out to the public. And now if we want to have the sinking of a ship with water effects, a breakup, and of course passengers and crew evacuating the ship and being on it at the end, like you would see in A Night to Remember or Cameron's film or the Barbara Stanwyck film, that would take actual professionals to finish. And we are working with professionals, but they are currently working on our character models, because as you can see right now, that's a lovely chair, but the Strausses are missing from their sitting room. And there's not even their maid is present, and they are working on getting our characters ready. Right now, they are just working on a few proof of concept characters, but that's one of the aspects is we want to make sure that we have many characters. We want to have many, I say characters, but of course they're actual passengers and crew, but they're still characters. They have to become characters in our game. Sometimes we have to give them a personality that we're not sure of, but that's what happens. Again, this is technically difficult, and if we want to, on top of that, add a sinking aspect, it's tenfold difficult because there's water. And I think if you want to figure out how difficult that is, call up any producer of a movie where there's a sinking ship. I guess call James Cameron, which is difficult in itself, and say, was it easy to sink your set, and see how that was. And now, on top of that, it's historically difficult because there's so much debate in how Titanic sank. Oftentimes, when I go to our YouTube page, because we have a YouTube, I think, and we have a sinking video on our YouTube which has a few views. People will leave in the comments, why didn't the ship break in half like it did in the movie, or why didn't it sink like this, etc. There's always an opinionated person who believes that it didn't sink correctly. Of course, usually it's an uneducated opinion, but there are so many people who do have an educated opinion on how it sank, and I want to make sure that it was represented correctly in our final project once it is released. And that will take a lot of work amongst our team members, our historical advisors, which do not just encompass the three I mentioned earlier, to get accurate, or as close to accurate as possible. So when the time comes to finally get the technical aspect of the sinking done, where it's going to go hand in hand with the historical accuracy worked on too for the sinking. So we don't have to just get the ship accurate, we don't also have to just get the passengers and the timeline accurate. We have to get the way that this ship basically broke apart accurate as well. And then again, the last aspect of how this is difficult is indeed, it is emotionally difficult. This is going to be the death of 1,496 people. We're all, everybody on the team loves Titanic. We've all started watching documentaries, watching A Night to Remember, or the movie Titanic, reading books. We didn't start this project thinking, man, it'd be cool to just have a video game about Titanic to make some money or something. So we were trying to do it as respectfully as possible. But we know that the way to do it respectfully is to show it as it actually happened. I think that there are ways to do it respectfully and to its full accurate representation. But again, this video game could be like Titanic movie from 1997, A Night to Remember, the Barbara Stanwyck movie. It can be all those wrapped up together. It can be emotionally appealing and as epic. It can be as historically accurate, and it can be as intriguing for you to get you engrossed to want more. There's still a lot to go. We have a lot more that we need to work on. We're still trying to finish the ship. A quick shout out to our historical texture artist, Nicolas Murgia in France. We have an international team from all over. I think they mentioned it, but for instance, that map that you just saw in the first class gymnasium, it's historically accurate to not Olympics map, but to Titanic's map, because of course, Olympics map and Titanic's map were different. We have so much more that we need to finish on the ship as we look at the engines for the motors for the elevators too. These are also accurate for Waygood Otis, the elevators that were on the ship. Hats off to Chris Daly for studying the elevators too from Australia. There's so many people who have weird aspects of the ship that they really love besides just passengers out there. So if you ever need one area of the Titanic really studied in depth, just let us know, because we have somebody in our team who will just love to talk to you for hours about windows, for instance. For hours. And the elevator gates, exactly. We have people who just love elevator gates.
Is that Windows 2010?
It's not, it's Windows 1911. Thank you for laughing. But we take us to the detectors boarding entrances.
Yes.
I don't know why, I just like that area.
We're gonna take the fast one.
I think I'm.
Oh, brighter there. Watch that last step.
Yeah, be careful. That's like flying. I'm flying. I'm so sorry. At the end, I'm not going to be pretty poorly. Okay, that was that. So yeah, it's refreshing to see some faces. Some of the things we have to do right now, I keep saying to Kyle after this conference, is we're going to have to go back and do a lot of. Don't zoom in on that. I don't want people at home to see that stuff yet. We're going to have to go through and refine a lot of areas on our lovely ship here. We're finishing up spaces, and we're going to do a lot of what we call optimization, which right now, if you take this, it's called a demonstration program, basically. If you take this and put it on a basic little laptop like I have right here, you will not open it. It will not run whatsoever. So, Kyle and I, and not just Kyle and I, but the other members on the team, we're going to go through everything that we have up here and really polish it off and make sure that it functions properly. It still won't run on my little laptop, but it will run more smoothly. While the other team members are working on everything else, we're going to be finishing the spaces that we still have to go through. I'm really glad you went into this area. For instance, this is the officers' quarters on the boat deck. I'm excited to soon be wrapping up Captain Smith's quarters, especially now. I was so close to getting this area finished for the conference, and it would have been so serendipitous because of how the dive just announced that his bathtub has disappeared at the wreck site, but we can get that finished in time. I did say in the beginning of the presentation, which this was going to be at the end, but I want to talk briefly about what else we do, because Titanic Honor and Glory has become more than just, for us anyway, a video game project. It started out as a video game project. It was going to be a small little thing where you could tour the ship, and then it became, thanks to our little fan base that we created, a gigantic video game project. As we have worked on this, we've looked into ways to bring Titanic back to life as many as we could possibly do. What we do now is, a lot of what you see here, we enjoy, and we are privileged to license the footage to documentaries and exhibits around the world, actually. We just licensed some footage to a new documentary, I think, in Canada that will come out, I believe, in the end of the fall, the end of autumn. We are also working, we just got another request for one in the United Kingdom. But in our spare time, as I said in the beginning, but I'm not going to say again, can I paint the lights actually? Because I'm going to talk about these guys. Because we enjoy making them, and we hope that you also would possibly enjoy them too, we are producing in mass quantities our little Titanic models right here. Super detailed. Zeno has printed these, painted these with his family, ridiculously detailed 3D model of not just Titanic, but RMS Olympic, RMS Britannic, as she would have been if she was completed, HMHS Britannic, nomadic in various scales, oceanic, the 3 Cunarders, Mauritania, Lusitania, Aquitania, the big 4 even. There's a couple more on the way, and we have replica, not here, but since they're flats, but you can see them at our table. Replica lifeboat plaques, the White Star Lighthouse flag, the specifications plaque, SS Titanic, Liverpool, all those fun things. And hopefully on the way, you can see here next to Kyle is a replica 21 light candelabra from the D-deck grand staircase landing, an engine telegraph, and a lifeboat davit, which actually, well, that actually can turn as well. The handle dial turns, just like it would on Titanic. There's going to be all variations of that guy too, and hopefully more bridge equipment. So, again, we do this because this helps us to stoke our boilers. The funds from these help us to go along as we continue the project. But we do these mainly because we desire them for our own collections. We think they're pretty cool. I know Kyle just had the desire one day to make a davit, and now here it is. Why not? That happens. Hey, I want a candelabra. Okay. And we have it. So there'll be more products as we go along. We can't help ourselves when we create these things. So we're excited to bring Titanic back to life in 3D. We hope to bring Titanic back to life in real D, I guess I could call it now. The biggest goal for us is to bring Titanic back to life 100% completely someday. So we'll see. So
It's gonna take a lot of plastic.
It's going to take a lot of plastic. But Titanic Honor and Glory is more than just a video game. It's more than just it was one big collection of Titanic chapters now. And the next chapter for us, I think is going to be very exciting. So I want to thank you all for this privilege to talk to you all today. Early in the morning, I need to get away for coffee. So I thank you all again. I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you. I have time for a question, Terry.
Hey, Matt, how would you come up with the name Honor and Glory anyway?
Well,
Titanic or?
one of the, it was, honor, I mean, originally it was named something else and we had to change it. And one of the team member in Australia, Chris, just was throwing ideas at me. He said, what about the clock? He said, it's named Honor and Glory. I'm like, yeah, it is. And then you can do something with the story. The storyline can also relate to your honor and your glory eventually. So it's twofold. It means it's multiple things. So now, I didn't go much into the story of the game itself because that's Tom's aspect and he's not here right now. But the storyline deals with you trying to basically gain back your honor, your glory, and the honor and glory of something else along the way. So the clock, is it a metaphor in a way? I'm asking if that's the right term.
It's the name of the clock.
It's the name of the clock, that's the big thing. So, but, you know,
The word clock, okay.
yeah, yes. You?
Yeah, who was the guy at the very beginning, it looked like it was an iron lung, there was a man like.
Oh, yes, there's, God, you wanted to say, I mean, that's just
It was a mustacheless, isn't it?
it's just a temporary 3D model of our Bruce Ismay without his mustache that we included early on in one of the demos that we released to the public because they did not have access to the electric bath room before. They could only see through the textured glass. They could see a figure in the electric bath. We annoyingly like to tease our fans with things. So they could see through the glass that there was a figure in that electric bath, but they couldn't see
That
who
was
it was.
electric bat.
Oh, that's a whole different subject. Whoa now. Yeah, electric bath is something those Edwardians were crazy, there were some crazy Edwardians. There were some crazy ones.
That was an electric bath that guy was in?
Yes. The easiest way to say is it's kind of like a 1912 canning bed.
It's basically just a big box with some.
Big box with some lights.
Yeah,
They
really
thought
bright lights.
lights were healthy back then.
Yeah.
We'll plan on that. Next session will begin at 10 o'clock. You have a break until then. You may want to come in and be ready to go right at 10. Frank Goldsmith will be presenting. We are at recess.